Hey YouTube, it's your boy Anime Princess back with a day 2 update for the Crit Spark League Starter. I think today's video as well as yesterday's video are the most important content you guys can be watching because there are hurdles jumping from the campaign into white maps, and yesterday's video I do cover some very budget ways to approach those hurdles to ensure you guys have success right from the start. And this video is going to be focused on going from yellow maps into red maps. And a lot of newer players will hit a red map wall when they make this transition because there is a massive power spike in difficulty, which I will talk about. And I'll go over how I addressed it by making some relatively budget changes to my character, and I'll explain the context behind those changes so you guys can replicate it to make this transition as easy as possible. But just keep in mind, this is going to be the biggest hurdle in the game for you guys. So, we'll touch on it. I'll give you guys some alternate solutions, maybe to make it even easier than what I went through on stream yesterday. I think first off, to touch on why there's this hurdle, you have to understand when you roll your maps, for every tier of map you go up, white, yellow, and red, the options for the mods get more difficult. So running a yellow, like a 6 mod yellow map would be easier than running those same 6 mods if they were on a red map. So just that alone makes the transition from T10 yellow to T11 red quite difficult. However, when you're getting Atlas completion, you also have to vol the red maps, which means we're turning those maps possibly into 8 mods. So now you're going from a situation where you're likely running like 4 modded yellow maps with easy mods to running 8 modded red maps with very difficult mods. So there's a very large gap in difficulty, and it comes really fast. And the second part of the difficulty is the Uber Lab. Now, I think Uber Lab is the hardest part of the game for Spark in general. And a lot of people in chat, they took 1 or 2 tries to do it. I think if you are going to go into Uber Lab, you want to be over leveled as much as possible. Now I'll go over my gear. I over leveled quite a bit. I think I went to 85, and also the trigger helmet, the focus trigger helmet that I talked about in day 1, I would say that is like mandatory. If you try and do lab without this, it is going to be more than twice as hard. It's going to be way harder, and it's going to be hard regardless. So make sure you do all the steps in the day 1 video before you go fight Uber Lab. However, once you do kill Uber Lab, you get a lot of damage, and it is going to help you make that transition into red maps much more seamlessly. All right, let's go over my gear. We're going to be talking about the budget I'm spending. Again, everything is still relatively budget, and I'm going to show you guys how to scale your DPS and defenses to what is actually probably double what I had in day 1 without spending too much money. All right, let's get into that. All right, so let's go over the gearing. So my first tip would be, if you haven't already, I would buy a Spark. You can get level 1 with decent quality and just put it in your offhand. See here, I have a Spark leveling up. It's already level 19 with quality 16. When this hits level 20, I'll just hit 4 gem cutter prisms on it to get the quality up to 20. Then you can take off your initial Spark, which probably has no quality. Getting 20% quality gives it 20% projectile speed, which just, more projectile speed makes the build a little bit safer because your projectiles are hitting enemies faster. It also feels a lot better. I'm actually getting projectile speed a few other ways for very budget. The next one is through these oils. Now you can take your amulet and put 2 verdant as well as 1 teal, and that will give you fury bolts. This gives us some damage, some projectile speed, and some strength. And if you guys are not already aware, with your character, you're going to get crit chance equal to the lowest of either your strength or your int value. So if your int is high, you kind of want to just keep finding strength on your gear until you can match it. So I'm getting a bonus 284% to my crit chance, which is helping me to crit cap. Now, one of the advantages of switching over to crit is crits are what apply shocks, chill, and freeze. And one of the best defensive layers I made as an upgrade in day 2 is Call of the Brotherhood, which lets us chill and freeze enemies. And enemies who are chilled and frozen will attack much slower, or if they're frozen, not attack at all. So this prevents a lot of our incoming damage, and I would advise you to crit swap for this, even if you don't have full crit swap, like 100%. Yesterday, I did crit swap in the day 1 video, and I was at about, I think, 50%, 60% crit chance, and that's fine. You know, you'll work your way up to 100. 100% crit chance only really matters once you do Uber Lab, and I hadn't done Uber Lab yesterday. So I would say this is a 25 chaos item, and it's probably the biggest defensive upgrade from day 1, day 2. The other defensive upgrade was, if you have a suffix on the belt, there's a new craft on the crafting bench called Chaos Resistance Against Damage Over Time. It's a really high value, and we're just not prioritizing Chaos Reds at this early point in the game, so this is sort of a band-aid solution to that. The other upgrade was, I guess the third one for projectile speed I should mention, is you can craft medium clusters are cheaper than large clusters. So if in the League Starter video, it does sort of imply you should look for a large cluster first, you probably won't be able to afford that. This cost me 10 chaos to craft. You can actually, there's 4 different mods that are useful in medium clusters, and you can hit them fairly easily with a 2-socket resonator, with the fossil that gives more cast speed mods and the fossil that gives more speed modifiers. And I just hit it once and I got repeater and streamlined. The other good mods you can get are aerodynamics or eye for an eye. I believe you can even buy a combination of these mods for pretty cheap. And you can combine this with a small cluster with Enduring Composure. Now, Enduring Composure, I advise just buying. Ideally, you want to have one that adds 2 passive skills instead of 3, so you don't have to grab 2 of these travel nodes. This gives us a lot of armor. Again, this is sort of one of the ways I'm scaling my armor. But more importantly, we get endurance charges when we've been hit. And even if we block something, we get the endurance charge. So this just gives us full endurance charges, which reduces incoming damage by a lot. As for the armor scaling, the ways I'm getting so high, we have a suffix that's 55% increased armor. And we have a lot of armor on all our gear, right? We have the helmet from day 1. I did manage to get some gloves with some armor. Again, don't worry too much about getting armor on the gloves, as I kind of went overkill. Armor boots. And then it's all getting scaled by this 55% increase. Groomies is something I dropped. I don't know if this is expensive, actually. It's 15 chaos. This gives us spell block and attack block, so there's a lot of synergy with us as well. This is a cheap upgrade. Now, as for the other upgrades, yeah, I talked about the clusters. That was the main one, the clusters in the Call of the Brotherhood. This is a more expensive upgrade. I think Death Rush with 2 seconds on Adrenaline, I paid roughly 1 divine for this. This only helps in mapping situations because, you know, it's on kill, but it gives us damage reduction, and it also gives us a lot of damage. So this is a more expensive option. If you can afford it, you can go for this. And what I did the last 30 minutes of stream was I crafted the aspirational body armor. It ended up only costing me 3 div, and I did it. It's such razor thin budget. I have 3 chaos left. Realistically, there's a little bit of RNG in this. I would say this would cost 5 divines on average at this point. And what this does do is it raises my damage from 550,000 to like 725,000. So it's a really big DPS boost because this is giving us frenzy charge on hit, and it basically crit caps us because we get a huge increase to our base crit, and base crit multiplies our increases to crit. So a small increase to base crit is going to be a large increase to overall crit. And you can watch the VOD if you want to see me crafting this. But on YouTube, if you scroll down further, because realistically, I don't advise doing this so early because it's so expensive, there is a crafting guide on how to craft this yourself. And if you want to craft it, make sure you watch the video a couple times because there's a lot of ways where you can just, like, if you don't pay attention, you might make a mistake and then brick the armor. So just, you know, pay attention to what you're doing. We don't want you guys to have a bricked armor because there's quite a few steps going into this. But yeah, this was the last thing I did. Again, I don't really want to touch on that because it's probably not something most of you newer players will be doing anytime soon. But yeah, to wrap this video up, let's just spend a couple seconds in POB to go over what is going to be attached in the description below. So as you can see, I have 547,000 damage. We have hidden armor value close to 30,000 now, and just FYI, I don't expect you to hit this much armor. I really did get lucky in the sort of armor bases I got, and that's why you're seeing it scaled to such high levels. Realistically, even if you guys hit 20,000, I think that would be pretty impressive. So yeah, don't think just because I have 27, you guys have to get this much. It's hard to do on a day 2 budget. Of note, though, we do have spell block. It's over capped, actually. I don't need this much. It's capped at 75, and I have a decent amount of block chance as well. So yeah, the medium cluster, I talked about how to craft it. You can just buy it. These are not necessarily the best 2 nodes. This is just very cheap. You know, a cheap way to get a lot of power right here. As for the config, it's the same. However, this is not configured for the body armor I just crafted because I think that's unrealistic. If you do put the body armor in, it does give us frenzy charges, and you can just sub it in so I get all the crit chance as well. As you see now, I'm at 724,000. So again, this body armor, once you can afford to craft it, following the guide on the YouTube channel, it is a really big more multiplier in damage. It's a huge power spike. So as we're talking about difficulty spikes, this is one way to help balance your character with a equal power spike to compensate. We are taking a lot of spell block on the tree. Eventually you can get spell block on gear, and then that can start going towards like a large cluster maybe. So today on stream, maybe that's going to be my goal, work towards a large cluster. You know, chaos res is not too good, so you know, I'm going to be dying of chaos damage. But I think chaos damage is not as common as Fizz and Ellie hits, so it's not something I would prioritize on the first few days of the league. We're using the belt. The belt does strongly mitigate with the craft chaos resistance against damage over time. So if you have an open suffix on your belt, you know, that's one way to just band-aid the whole thing. Yeah. I think that's what I wanted to talk about. If you're having trouble doing Uber Lab, you can get a boss carry. Later on in day 2, I did do my first 2 Void Stones. I guess we can just quickly look at my Atlas completion. We're doing the Wandering Path strat with 103. And I do have the 2 Void Stones. I did these on roughly 500,000 POB damage. Eater of Worlds was deathless. You can see it in the VODs. The Searing Exarch, I died to the bald phase repeatedly. Now, these fights took upwards of 5 minutes, I believe. These are, if you're a new player, don't worry though, because these are frankly tutorial fights, and if you fail them in like 3 to 4 maps, you get to try them again. So yeah, you could buy a carry. I would just use them to benchmark your character, try them a few times. Yeah, it's good practice. That's generally what I want to talk about for day 2. Again, these are the hardest parts of the game for a Spark character. You know, it starts to become smooth sailing once you overcome these hurdles. I hope this advice does help you in making your character as strong as you can in these first few days, because you're going to have a lot of fun ahead of you after you get through this initial hump. All right, I'm going to be live on Twitch after this goes up. Hope to see you there. Hope you guys are having a fun league start. Catch you guys tomorrow in the next video.